The morning sunlight poured through the lace curtains, painting patterns across the pale walls of Aisha's new room. She sat on the edge of the bed, her wedding bangles clinking softly against each other like shy whispers. Outside, she could hear faint laughter from the courtyard. Relatives, neighbors, maybe cousins still teasing about the night before. Inside, though, everything was still. The air smelled faintly of rose petals and cardamom tea. It was her first day after marriage. The thought echoed in her mind like a quiet bell. Her hands rested in her lap, the mehndi fading slightly, but still deep enough to remind her of all the faces that had watched her leave her parents' house the night before. She could still feel her mother's trembling hands as she adjusted her dupatta one last time. Her father hadn't said much, just that low, careful kuda tumhain kush rake that carried more love than any speech ever could. Now, in this unfamiliar room, she was someone's wife. Ryan had been kind. Gentle even. During the wedding, he'd spoken little, his calm presence strangely grounding amid the chaos of lights, cameras, and rituals. He wasn't a stranger. She'd met him twice before the wedding. But that didn't make the new reality any less daunting. The space between them was still a wide field of silence, filled with questions neither dared to ask too soon. A knock came at the door. Aisha beta, chai le ao, her mother-in-law's voice floated in, soft but firm. Aisha quickly adjusted her dupatta and stood. Her feet felt light, uncertain, as she walked toward the small mirror. The reflection staring back looked like her, but quieter, almost gentler. The heavy bridal jewelry was gone, replaced by a simple gold chain. Her eyes, however, told the story of a storm she was trying hard to calm. Downstairs, the morning bustle of the household made her chest tighten and ease all at once. The scent of parathas on the stove, the murmur of a TV show playing somewhere in the background, the casual laughter of women who had known each other for years, it all made her feel like she'd entered a play mid-scene. Everyone already knew their lines. She was still learning the script. When she entered the kitchen, Rayhan's mother smiled kindly. "Ah, there you are. Sit, Beta, I'll get you some breakfast." "Oh no, please let me help," Aisha said quickly, but the older woman shook her head. "You're a guest for a few days. After that, we'll see," she teased, eyes twinkling. It made Aisha smile despite her nerves. Later, when she took the tray of tea to the sitting room, she found Rayhan reading the newspaper. He looked up, their eyes meeting briefly before he smiled. A soft, hesitant smile that felt both awkward and real. "Good morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, placing the tray down. Her hands trembled slightly, the cups rattling against the saucers. He noticed. "You okay?" She nodded. "Just new place, new everything." "Yeah," he said quietly. "It'll take time, but you don't have to rush into being comfortable." That line, so simple, sat with her for hours after he left for work. Throughout the day, she explored the house, every corridor echoing with unfamiliar sounds. The old grandfather clock in the hallway ticked like a heartbeat. In her room, the bed looked too large for one person, the silence too heavy for comfort. She sat by the window, watching the world outside. A street lined with neem trees, children chasing a ball, an old vendor calling out for fresh guavas. Life went on, unchanged by her small world of change. At noon, she received a message. "Rayhan, did you eat lunch?" Aisha, "Not yet." "I'll eat soon." "Rayhan, don't skip it." "You'll get a headache," she smiled. The message was ordinary, yet it warmed her chest. Maybe this was how connection began. The next morning began with the hush of dawn. Aisha stirred before the first call to prayer, the soft rustle of her dupatta the only sound in the still room. She'd hardly slept. Her thoughts had been a restless swirl of faces, memories, and the quiet rhythm of Rayhan's breathing beside her. It still felt strange to wake up and realize she was someone's wife. She slipped out of bed and drew back the curtains. Pale light washed over the courtyard below, where a single bird hopped along the edge of the fountain. The world looked clean, untroubled, a fragile calm she wished she could hold on to. In the kitchen, she found Rayhan's mother already awake. The older woman's bangles clinked as she poured tea into a cup. "Morning, Beta. Did you sleep?" Aisha smiled politely. "A little." "Good. Rayan leaves early for work. I packed his lunch, but maybe you can give it to him yourself." It was a small gesture, yet her heart skipped. She carried the tiffin box to the doorway where Rayan was tying his shoes. The morning light touched his face, outlining the quiet seriousness in his features. "I'll take that," he said, reaching for the box. Their fingers brushed, just a fleeting contact, but it sent a quick, unexplainable warmth through her chest. "Thanks," he added. She hesitated, then asked softly, "You want breakfast first?" He smiled. "I'll grab something on the way, but save me some of that paratha for tomorrow." And then he was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of his cologne and a silence that hummed with unspoken things. The days unfolded like threads of silk, slow, delicate, shimmering with small moments that stitched themselves into something larger. Aisha began to learn the rhythms of the household. When the servants came, when her mother-in-law liked her tea, which flowers to water before noon. But more than that, she began to learn the rhythm of Rayan's presence, the sound of his car arriving at dusk, the way he always loosened his tie as he stepped inside, the gentle exhaustion that softened his voice. Some evenings he'd find her sitting on the balcony, and they'd share tea in comfortable near silence. She'd tell him about her day, mostly uneventful, and he'd talk about the endless meetings at work. Yet beneath the ordinary words, something tender was growing, fragile and real. One night, rain began to fall, sudden, hard, cleansing. The smell of wet earth filled the air. The electricity flickered, then went out completely. Rayan lit a candle. Its golden light trembled across his face as he placed it between them on the table. "I used to love power cuts," he said, half smiling. "Made the world quiet enough to think?" She laughed softly. "In my home, we hated them. My brothers would tease me in the dark until I cried." He looked at her, really looked, as if the candlelight made her words visible in the air. "Do you miss them?" he asked. "Every minute," she said honestly. "But it's strange. I don't feel lost here, just new." The power returned with a snap, but for a heartbeat neither moved. The sudden brightness felt too sharp. Something had shifted, small, invisible but unmistakable. A week later came her first real test. That morning, Rayan's aunt visited unannounced, a woman known for her opinions. As they all sat in the drawing room sipping tea, the aunt's gaze fell on Aisha's dupatta, loosely draped over her shoulder. "In our family, we keep modesty as pride," she said pointedly. "New brides shouldn't forget their place." The words hit like cold water. Aisha's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. Rayan's mother changed the subject gently, but the embarrassment stayed, heavy as stone. That night, she barely spoke during dinner. Rayan noticed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said. He watched her quietly. "It's not nothing. Tell me." When she finally told him, her voice trembled with more hurt than she meant to show. He listened without interruption, then said softly, "You did nothing wrong. Don't let every word weigh on you." "But she's family," Aisha whispered. "I don't want to seem disrespectful." "You were respectful," he said. "You just weren't silent enough for her comfort. There's a difference." His words steadied her, not just because they defended her, but because they understood her. Later that night, as she lay awake, she realized that love sometimes begins not in the grand moments, but in the quiet defense of one's dignity. Days turned into weeks. They learned each other in fragments, how he always forgot where he kept his keys, how she hummed when nervous, how both of them preferred silence to small talk. They argued once about something trivial, like which color to paint the spare room, and ended up laughing in the middle of it. Aisha began to write again in her old notebook, small reflections about her new life. "He listens without trying to fix me. That's rarer than love itself." One evening, as she arranged flowers in the living room, Rayan entered carrying 2 cups of tea. "Peace offering," he said. "For what?" she asked. For yesterday. I shouldn't have raised my voice, she smiled. You didn't. You just forgot to listen halfway through. He laughed, the tension melting away. Then, quietly, you make this house feel alive. The words stayed with her long after he left the room. When her parents visited later that month, Aisha realized something had changed inside her. Her mother fussed over her, checking every corner. The season changed almost silently. The heat softened, the evenings turned gentler, and the wind carried the scent of ripened mangoes and damp soil. By then, it had been 3 months since Aisha had come to this house. 3 months of learning, growing and quietly falling in love with the man who was once just a name written beside hers on a wedding invitation. But love, she was learning, wasn't all softness. Sometimes it hid inside silence, waiting for the right moment to be noticed. One morning, Rayon left for work earlier than usual. He looked distracted, a crease of worry between his brows, his phone constantly buzzing. Aisha watched him button his shirt with practiced haste. You okay? She asked. He nodded, avoiding her eyes. Just office pressure. I'll be fine. But that night he came home late, past midnight, his shoulders slumped, his voice tired. She waited up for him, the food on the table growing cold. You didn't have to stay awake, he said quietly, guilt flickering across his face. I wasn't sleepy, she lied. He smiled faintly, but his eyes didn't meet hers. In the days that followed, the distance between them grew, not from anger, but from unspoken things. Rayan was still gentle, still kind, but there was a new heaviness in him. He smiled less, spoke less, and when she asked what was wrong, he brushed it off. Then one evening, as she was folding laundry, she found a letter tucked in his coat pocket. A legal notice from his company. Something about financial losses, disputes, court hearings. Her chest tightened. She placed the letter back exactly where it was and waited for him to tell her himself. He didn't. A week later, she decided to ask. They were eating dinner in silence when she finally said, I saw the letter, Rayan. He froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. Then, with a long breath, he set it down. I didn't want you to worry. I already was, she said softly. You've been carrying this alone. He rubbed his forehead, exhaustion weighing every word. The company's being investigated. My name came up because of a deal I approved months ago. It's complicated, Aisha. I'll handle it. She reached across the table, placing her hand over his. You don't have to handle it alone. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then his shoulders dropped, and something in his eyes broke open. Fear, vulnerability, and relief all tangled together. I didn't want to drag you into it, he whispered. You already did, she said gently. That's what marriage means, isn't it? We share the storms too. The following weeks were a blur. Rayan attended meetings, answered phone calls, and met lawyers. The house felt heavier, the air thick with tension. Aisha tried to keep things normal, making his favorite dishes, keeping the house bright, talking to his mother so she wouldn't worry. But some nights, she cried quietly when he wasn't home. Then came the day of the hearing. He dressed in a dark suit, his expression unreadable. Before he left, Aisha stopped him at the door. Rayan, she said, her voice trembling. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. He looked at her for a long second, his eyes tired but soft. You shouldn't have to be. I already am. He smiled faintly, that small, fragile smile that had once melted the silence between them, and left. The house felt empty without him. Every sound, the ticking clock, the passing cars outside, echoed too loudly. She made dua quietly, her hands trembling as she prayed not for victory, but for strength. Hours passed before she heard his car. When he walked in, she knew before he spoke. The relief in his eyes said everything. The case had been dismissed. His name was cleared. He sank into the sofa, his face buried in his hands. She knelt beside him and whispered, Alhamdulillah. He looked up then, eyes glistening. You waited? Always, she said simply. And then, for the first time since their wedding, He reached for her and held her. Really held her. No words, no explanations, just quiet closeness that said everything words could not. The following days felt lighter. Rayan laughed again, teased her about overcooked rice, played music in the car. But something deeper had changed. A thread between them now pulled tighter, stronger. One evening, he found her on the balcony, just like that first night. She was watching the sunset, her hair glowing gold in the dying light. "Do you remember," he said, "the first day you came here? You looked terrified." She laughed softly. "I was. And now?" "Now," she said, looking at him. "I think I'm home." He smiled, stepping closer. "You know, I was scared too. Everyone expects men to be confident, but I didn't know how to be someone's husband. I still don't. Most days." She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You're doing fine?" He caught her hand gently, holding it against his chest. "You made it easy." The silence that followed wasn't awkward anymore. It was full of gratitude, of shared history, of love that had survived its first test. A month later, Aisha's mother fell ill. It wasn't serious, but it meant traveling back to her parents' house for a few days. Rayan encouraged her to go, but as she packed her bag, she realized how strange it felt to leave, not because of duty, but because her heart had found comfort here. The night before her trip, she and Rayan sat together on the terrace. The city lights blinked below like scattered stars. "I'll miss this," she said quietly. "It's just a few days," he replied, though his tone said otherwise. She smiled. Still, when she left the next morning, he stood by the gate, watching her go. The road stretched ahead, and for the first time, she understood what it meant to miss someone not out of need, but out of love. At her parents' house, everything felt smaller, familiar yet distant. The walls, the old furniture, the garden where she once sat reading, they were all pieces of another life. Her mother noticed it too. "You've changed," her mother said one afternoon. "You look calmer," Aisha smiled. "Maybe I am." That night, as she lay in her old bed, her phone buzzed. "Rayan, the house feels empty without you." "Aisha, it's just a few days." "Rayan, still." She laughed softly, the same word she'd said to him. The symmetry of it made her heart ache in the best way. When she returned, he was waiting by the gate again, just as before. But this time, when she stepped out of the car, he didn't hesitate. He walked straight to her and hugged her, right there in the open. No words. No shyness. His mother, watching from the balcony, smiled quietly and went inside. Later that night, Aisha sat by the window again, her head resting on Rayan's shoulder. The air outside was cool, the stars faint but steady. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think marriage was about love stories, about roses and moonlight and promises." "And now?" he asked. "Now I think it's about patience, about holding each other through silence and fear, about learning to speak even when words are hard." Rayan took her hand, pressing it lightly. "Then I hope we never stop learning." In the quiet that followed, Aisha thought back to her first morning here, how small and uncertain